Georgia, a team that is historically great at running the football, is coming off of its worst year doing so in almost 20 seasons. On the flip side, Georgia's coming off of its worst year stopping the run since 2018. It's been 6 years since Georgia has allowed as many yards as it did on the ground as it did a year ago. And Kirby Smart talked about what they're emphasizing in practice. It comes as no surprise.
There's been growth. I mean, we put a big emphasis on running and stopping the run because we feel like we lacked in both those areas last year. So the spring practice has been shifted or adjusted a little bit towards stopping the run and being able to run the ball. I don't know if we've improved on it, but we've harped on it.
When Georgia's practicing right there behind me across the street, they're emphasizing running the ball and stopping the run. They brought in some more guys to help them in the run game, which the coaching staff. And look, this is a running back room that didn't really make any improvements this offseason. Ryan Kelly from Dawg Post here talking about Georgia's running back situation and stopping the run. We'll talk about the running backs here first. Trevor Etienne, he's gone. He's off to the NFL. He was supposed to be Georgia's lead back, and he was for a good portion of the year last season when they dipped into the transfer portal and went and got him from Florida. He's suspended in that first game, so that put a wrench in it at the beginning. And then he dealt with injuries throughout the year, dealt with rib injuries. And so Nate Frazier ended up becoming RB2. Why? Because of Branson Robinson and Roderick Robinson, guys that were supposed to be ahead of him on the depth chart, dealing with injuries of their own. They're still dealing with those injuries this spring. They're both limited. They're not really practicing with the team. They're doing their own workouts. So Georgia's running situation doesn't necessarily seem to have improved this offseason, but they're trying to get better. And when you have a lot of injuries and when a guy like Etienne comes in and just plays pretty much a handful of games, only gives you about 600 yards, you look and say, okay, well, Nate Frazier will probably have a jump. But then behind that, Cash Jones is still around, not a guy they give a lot of carries to. There's no one else on this Georgia roster other than Nate Frazier that has at least 100 carries in their Georgia career. There's some young guys. There's Chauncey Bowens. There's Dwight Phillips Jr. There's Bo Walker, a true freshman that's coming in and is already here at spring practice now. I asked Kirby, hey, look, outside of Nate, who else is stepping up? How are the younger guys doing? This is what he had to say.
Chauncey and Dwight have been great bright spots there. In my opinion, they both are getting better. They're competing. Dwight's hit some big runs. Chauncey's made some really good cuts. Nate's been very consistent. And then, Dylan Bell has taken some reps there. We mix Dylan in practice to practice. He works in the slot. He's trying to develop as a wide receiver and a back. He's been great and in like a good attitude and being committed to, coach, if it means me playing 10, 15 snaps at back, I want to do it. If I can develop as a slot, I want to do it. So those guys have been good. A couple of the young guys, Micah Bell, Dylan's brother, has done a good job in there getting reps. Wade Penn has done a nice job. So really proud of the way those guys compete and work and take their reps.
He likes what he's seeing out of Chauncey Bowens and Dwight Phillips Jr. And I think it's important to note that he said that Dylan Bell is getting those reps at running back as well. Rewind back to 2023. Georgia is entering the season with a running back duo of Kendall Milton and Daijun Edwards. Guys that are older players, seniors, heading into their final year. Well, both of them were dealing with injuries at the beginning of the season. Kendall Milton dealt with injuries throughout his Georgia career. Daijun Edwards was getting banged up as well. So early on in September of 2023, Georgia didn't have a lot of depth at running back. They didn't have Nate Frazier. I don't know that they had that type of trust in Cash Jones. Branson Robinson was ruled out for the season, so Georgia was dealing with a lot of injuries. Versatile player in Dylan Bell. They put him in the backfield, and there were moments where he looked like he was Georgia's arguably his most versatile running back. He had about 157 yards in 2023. He was Georgia's 5th leading rusher. If you want to put that into perspective of how many yards Georgia ran for in 2024, Dylan Bell had 107 yards in 2024, and he was Georgia's 3rd leading rusher. Georgia, as a team, only 1,742 yards. I'll get to that in a second. But Dylan Bell, a guy that's roping in, and look, it's probably someone you'll see get some carries again. He wants to be a Deebo Samuel type of player. right, that used to play for the 49ers. Now he's at the Washington Commanders, who can run the ball, can catch the ball, can play outside, can play inside. That's the type of player that Dillon Bell wants to be. It seems like Georgia might need it and is allowing it in practice. Georgia, 742 rushing yards, 24 rushing touchdowns. It was the least productive rushing season outside of the COVID year in 2020 when the season was shortened. You got to go back to 2006 to where they were not productive, this little in production. And they were third to last in the SEC in total rushing yards, and they were second to last in the conference in yards per game. That is not Georgia's standard. Kirby talks a lot about it. He's talked a lot about recently what Georgia's standard is. Their standard is excellence. Their standard is what happened in 2021 and 2022 in all areas. What were they doing? Rushing for over 3,000 yards, rushing for over 2,500 yards in those seasons. That just didn't happen last year, and Georgia's offense wasn't clicking, and the run game is a part of why it wasn't clicking. So, like I said, they didn't stop the run as well as they usually do either. And there's a few games where you can pinpoint, hey, there was a problem here. There was a problem here. It was on both sides of the ball. Here are a few games I have picked out. Kentucky in September, they go up to Lexington. It's just a smash mouth type of game. Neither team can score. The final score ends up being 13-12 in that contest. Kentucky outrushed Georgia 170 to 102 yards. Georgia got outrushed by 68 yards in that game. It was a late touchdown that helped Georgia win that game. They held Kentucky to 4 field goals, but they let Brock Vandagriff scramble around. They let those running backs get going a little bit, and on the other side of it, they couldn't run the ball as well as Kentucky did on them. 2 weeks later, they get a bye week, and then they have to go into Tuscaloosa against Alabama. Everyone remembers that crazy game. Everyone remembers the Ryan Williams catches. Well, when you examine the run game, Jalen Milroe had his way. Justin Haynes, Alabama running back, had his way on a couple of runs. Bama outrushed Georgia 177-80 in terms of yards. Now you can look at game stripped. You can say, hey, Georgia was coming from behind for a lot of that football game. They had to pass it. Yeah, but they still didn't run the ball effectively early on in that football game. Caused problems for Georgia. Alabama did it better, and they didn't stop Jalen Milroe from scrambling around. And you'll kind of sense a theme here. Quarterbacks that can run the football have given Georgia some serious problems. November, a game that Georgia won, and a game where Georgia won by a lot, right? 50-something to 21, I believe, in that UMass game. I don't have the score off the top of my head, but it was a sound win for Georgia. They got outrushed by a team that ended up being 2-9, 2-10 that season in UMass. They got outrushed 226 to 208 yards. So Georgia gets over 200 yards in that game. It's solid, but they couldn't stop UMass from running the football. 226 yards. Georgia Tech, 8 overtime game. What happened? Georgia Tech ran all over Georgia, and it started early. It started on the opening drive for the Yellow Jackets. They outrushed Georgia 260 yards to 108 yards. That is a wide margin. Georgia ends up gutting that out in 8 overtimes. Nate Frazier has the game-winning 2-point conversion, but still, it was an ugly way to get there. And then, obviously, against Notre Dame, a lot of things went wrong, but another thing that went wrong was the fact that Notre Dame ran for 154 yards compared to Georgia's 62 on the ground. Georgia got outrushed. They couldn't stop the ball. They couldn't run the ball well in a lot of these games. And look, Bama lost. Notre Dame lost. Tech barely won in 8 overtimes. Kentucky won by 1 point at the end of the fourth quarter there. Gunnar Stockton, quarterback for Georgia, said that running the ball is something that's one of their main focuses. It means something more around here, is what he told the media on Tuesday night just down the road at Butts-Mehre. And it's interesting because the identity of Georgia, especially under Kirby Smart, has been stopping the run. Think about the 21 and the 22 teams with all the guys they had on the defensive line. Well, Georgia's had a lot of good guys on the defensive line last year. They're out the door. There's a lot of production that's going between Jalen Walker and Mykel Williams, Tyrion Higgins-Dawkins, guys that are good in run stop. A couple other guys like Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse. Georgia's going to have to replace a lot of that on the defensive line as well. I talk about how there's a lack of experience in the running back room. There's also a lack of experience on the defensive front. So in both of these areas, Georgia has a lot to figure out. There are a lot of question marks, and that's why they're emphasizing it in practice. They're trying to get better at running the ball. They're trying to get better at stopping the run. It's been a huge part of Georgia's identity. Is that going to get better? We'll hopefully hear about it in these scrimmages coming up on these next couple Saturdays, and then G-Day. It'll be interesting to see who wins that battle. Is it the first-team defense that has maybe a couple freshmen on it this year, right? Maybe Isaiah Gibson, Dara Ikenagbin. We know Gabe Harris is out. Joseph Jonah-Ajonye is limited, right? Christian Miller, Jordan Hall. Will that first team defense win that battle? Is Nate Frazier going to become a superstar? Will Chauncey Bowens or Dwight Phillips step up? There are a lot of questions in the run game for Georgia. They're trying to get that figured out right there across the street during spring practice. Thanks for watching.